Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Claudia Lastro, and it is my honor to welcome our audience and this distinguished panel of experts in the name of the Southeast Europe Association, Südosteuropa-Gesellschaft. So the occasion of this roundtable discussion today is the 25th anniversary of the NATO military intervention against the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. So 25 years ago, or to be more precise, on the 24th of March, 1999, NATO launched an airstrike campaign against the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia that lasted for 78 days. The campaign's objective was to force Slobodan Milosevic to accept the conditions of an internationally brokered peace agreement to end the war in Kosovo. So one may conclude the NATO intervention achieved its objective, yet it was not, and it has not been, without controversy to this day. So some cause of ongoing debate are the high toll in terms of human lives, displacements, damages to infrastructure and the environment that the campaign took. Moreover, it was the first ever NATO military campaign under the banner of a humanitarian intervention, and it was also the first time that NATO launched a campaign without prior endorsement by the UN. So today, under the title, Memory of Politics, we want to discuss the legacy of the NATO campaign, or more precisely, the contested legacy. So in Serbia, the 24th of March is nowadays commemorated as an act of foreign aggression. In Kosovo, the NATO intervention is remembered as a turning point in the war and a stepping stone towards state independence. And again, in the member states of the North Atlantic Alliance, we see a striking absence of commemoration on the airstrike campaign. But not only is there disagreement on how to construe the events, to this date, there's also no consensus on the number of casualties or even the use of terminology. So I believe there will be a lot to delve into today, and it is my great pleasure to introduce Nevenka Tromp as the moderator of this discussion. So Nevenka is a lecturer at the University of Amsterdam and adjunct professor at the Webster University in Leiden. In the past, she worked for the Dutch Institute for War Documentation. She was principal researcher in the leadership research team and the office of the prosecutor at the International Crime Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in the trial of Slobodan Milosevic. She served as executive director of the Geoffrey Nice Foundation on Law, History, Politics, and Society in the context of mass atrocities, and as principal researcher for Netherlands Compensation Commission Postdoctoral. So before I hand over to Nevenka, only one little organizational remark left from my side. So the audience may submit questions via the Q&A window, which you can do throughout the event, which Nevenka will collect and direct to the speakers later on during the Q&A. So yeah, I believe at this point, the only thing that remains for me to say is thank you to the panelists for being here, for your time and for sharing your insights, and also our audience for the great interest. And I wish all of us an insightful and interesting discussion.
Thank you very much, Claudia. And I wish you all a very warm welcome, especially our three panelists. And I would also express gratitude on my behalf, the panelists, but also the audience for the initiative of Südosteuropa-Gesellschaft to actually organize webinar on this very important topic. Timekeeping is going to be quite an important part of what we are going to do. So we are going to have two rounds of questions. First round of questions, it will be actually the same question put before three panelists, and each of them will have 7 minutes to answer it. And that will bring us to the second part. We hope that in 30 minutes, we will finish this first part. And then in a second part, I will pose for each panelist a different question for which they will have 5 minutes time to discuss. Given this very strict timetable, I hope that the audience understands that 5 minutes or 7 minutes of answer is quite short, especially for the people of this competence and experience before us. But any other sub-question or return to of these topics will be very welcome in the discussion, because we hope that the timekeeping and division of labor will be divided 45 minutes, meaning that we hope that the audience will be a very active part in this discussion when it comes to substance. Before I introduce three panelists and articulate the first question, I would like to draw attention to the audience that we actually prepared 5 themes as collection of various topics, and I will shortly tell you how we deconstructed these general titles. So the first theme we thought should be event history, or establishing the facts. Simply said, what really happened before, during, and after NATO intervention in Kosovo that is still worth recounting, repeating, or actually presenting to old and ever new audience when it comes to this topic. Second theme is historiography. It is about interpretations of what happened and how it happened. Third is normative narrative of legality of NATO intervention, and is the concept of humanitarian intervention something that will survive in the future, or have we moved on from that normative framework? Fourth one is justice narrative, victims' justice versus justice to all. How can we conceptualize what happened to whom and how when it comes to accounting, or to hold those accountable that that were involved in the events of Kosovo War in late 1990s. And the fifth theme is collective memory: why, how, and what shall remember, and who decides about it, what and how we shall remember. So after this topical introduction, a disclaimer for my part. I'm here in Amsterdam in the middle of a university downtown campus, and as we speak, there are some demonstrations by students in favor of Gaza, and the demonstrations are spreading to all buildings. So at a certain point, I might disappear from your screen, trying to find some safe refuge if this building has to be completely evacuated. But the good news is that Claudia Lastro will be there to continue on my behalf if I will not be able to do as planned and be your moderator from the start to the end of this webinar. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Ms. Nataša Kandić. Many of you in the audience know her personally, heard of her name, and for quite few new generation participants in audience, this might be the new name. And Nataša Kandić is one of the people who has a very, very huge biography because of her immense contribution to this particular topic of dealing with humanitarian issues as the Yugoslav conflict progressed. But for people like her, with such a rich personal and professional background, best biographies are the shortest ones. So Nataša Kandić is the founder and director of International Humanitarian Fund, a Belgrade-based non-governmental organization with a very elaborate regional network. And Nataša also initiated inter-regional reconciliation program known as RECOM. Our second panelist and speaker is Christian Costamagna. Christian is Italian with degrees, MA and PhD degrees from the Italian universities, but his internships, field work, and teaching positions were very much connected with the former Yugoslavia. He spent some time in Belgrade, Ljubljana, and as currently he has tight working connections with University of Rijeka. But why is he here? He has been studying for his PhD research the issues connected with Kosovo wars, and his current research is on Kosovo War and the 1999 NATO military intervention against Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. And our third speaker is Franziska Tschinderle, and she is the youngest panelist, which I personally appreciate very much. Why? Because she and her generation will simply demonstrate and carry on the importance of that, what was happening in 1998 and 1999 in Kosovo, and why the NATO intervention on Kosovo and its aftermath actually wrote a history on many different disciplinary levels. So Franziska has been working, she's Austrian, has been working as a freelance journalist based in Tirana in Albania, but the scope of her reporting for German language media in Austria, Germany, and Switzerland is very much also directed towards the Kosovo topics. And she wrote extensively on commemoration and reconstruction of NATO bombing intervention and consequences of it. She also interviewed Austrian politician and diplomat Wolfgang Petric, who was among the last diplomats to negotiate with Milosevic and the last diplomat to leave Belgrade on 24th of March of 1999. She also followed the visit of Bill Clinton in Kosovo in 2019, as well as the visit of Madeleine Albright and Wesley Clark, who joined. And Franziska also wrote recently about Putin and how he's used 1999 in the Russian for his own narratives and even to legitimize his war against Ukraine. So thank you very much for being with us. And I'm now going to introduce the speakers. I would like Nataša, Kandić to answer first the question, followed by Franziska, and then Christian at the end. And the question that I'm going to articulate, spell out also for our audience, is what happened that led to the NATO intervention in Kosovo in 1999? And please, when you answer it, try to identify about 4 events, places, or persons that, according to you, represent the way how the Kosovo armed conflict escalated in international armed conflict, and why is it still relevant and remembered as it is. Each of you obviously will have a different angle to it, but what we want here is to establish some factual background also for the purpose of your discussion, but also for the audience that might be very diverse in the level of pre-knowledge and understanding what happened in the past. So Nataša, Kandić, please, the floor is yours. And next 7 minutes, we look forward to listen to your contribution.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this invitation, this event. Especially with the information that students are very active with their solidarity with what's happened to Palestinians. And our obligation, having that in mind, is to be very concrete relating human rights in time of armed conflict, thinking on victims, thinking on obligation of the so-called international community and others having different type of obligation. I will speak based on my knowledge. When I say knowledge, it means that I spent many times in Kosovo from 90. And during the 98 and 99 and 2000 until date, I'm very often there. And for me, it was 98 was crucial, you know, when ICTY decided, you know, to take the responsibility for human rights violation in Kosovo. It was in end of February when the Hague Tribunal said to the public and to the especially government of Serbia that there are elements which led to responsibility of ICTY, because elements of armed conflict for them was seen in the field. And what's happened in the field, it was you know, different types of human rights violations without any measures to protect civilians. International community were present in 98 in Kosovo. Some action between initiated by international community action leading to establish some you know, some measures will stop violations without any success. But in October, after many committed crimes in Kosovo, Serbian regime leading by Milosevic accepted presence of Kosovo verification mission. And as you know, in the beginning, what we could see in the field that Serbian military forces were obliged to withdraw from Kosovo, but it was only for the short time, and after that everything was as before. And it was clear that diplomacy and many different attempts of Europeans, Americans were not successful in bringing normal conditions to talk about how to stop serious, very gross human rights violations in Kosovo. Many Albanians during the summer, in autumn of 98, were forced to leave Kosovo to go to Macedonia, to go Montenegro, and parts of them also went to Albania. And from human rights perspective, it was, you know, it was time with serious questions. What will be the next step of international strategy relating situation in Kosovo? Because we saw many people forced to leave, promises of Serbian government that they will stop to destroy civil property. But after that, we saw the same. And what's happened, especially in January, Račak event, and it was really a case of war crimes with strength to, you know, to initiate stronger reaction of international community. And, you know, solidarity towards Kosovo, towards Albania were bigger. And, you know, explanation relating what's happened in Račak was very big from Serbian side, but present Kosovo verification mission were very strong in their claim that it was really serious crime caused by Kosovo verification leader as a massacre with victims on the side of civilians. And it was clear that there are no space for the same as before, to talk, to invite Serbian government to stop, to withdraw some military forces. That situation is much is completely different than before. Rambouillet peace, Rambouillet is chance for reaching peace agreement was with the big failure without result. On one side, the Serbian politicians, especially members of delegation, they were very. It was clear that they were not able to participate in a debate on constructive level. They were instructed by President Serbia, you know, to be very strong, accusing internationals, Americans and Albanians that they are not ready to listen Serbian side, and without understanding that Kosovo is part of Serbia. Failure of Rambouillet peace agreement was beginning of the new stage in Kosovo, Kosovo political and war time. It was clear that that there are no space for the new discussion on diplomatic level. All politicians who came just before the beginning of NATO bombing was without any result, and it was clear that NATO will start with intervention, explaining that intervention is the aim to prevent humanitarian catastrophe in Kosovo.
Nataša, Nataša, gentle reminder, you need to wrap up, because anything else you need to say, we will try to do it in a discussion, because we really want to keep time within the frames. So if you have 1 or 2 sentences to wrap it up.
Okay, I wanted only to add, you know, I think that to this this issue, Racha crime and failure of Rambouillet peace agreement were, you know, were enough as evidence that there are no space for diplomatic to continue with diplomacy. And, you know, it was clear that new stage will be seen in Kosovo. And I will finish this part with mentioning what's happened on the 20th March. All international organizations left Kosovo. Nobody stayed. Albanians were without any protection. International Committee for Red Cross also left. Journalists were left. Only, you know, population, Kosovo Liberation Army, were majority of them were in Albania or in the woods, in the field, in their houses, with fear. There were people, Albanian population, without any protection. And later, I will continue to speak about what's happened from human rights perspective, but also later I will speak about memory politics, especially having in mind about collective memory in Kosovo, but also about new narratives in Serbia.
Thank you so much, Nataša. Christian, please, the floor is yours. 7 minutes sharp. I'm watching you, listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nevenka, and thank you for this invitation. It is really an honor for me today. it is important when we think about the NATO intervention, that it is also called the Operation Allied Force. We have to start from the beginning. I mean, when it started the idea to intervene against Serbia because of Kosovo, we have to go back in 1992, 7 years earlier, when Serbia supported the secession and the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina. On the other side of the Atlantic, in the United States, they started to think that it was better to protect the national interests of the United States in Europe, and in that case, in the southeastern flank of Europe, to do something, to warn. And that policy was shaped by, at the end of the Bush father administration. So in December 1992, we had the so-called Christmas warning. It was a warning to Milosevic, saying, be careful, because if you start a new ethnic cleansing, a new war in Kosovo against Albanians, the United States may intervene militarily directly against Belgrade, against Serbia. So that was the prehistory of this historical event. But we have to consider one aspect, because why Kosovo and not Bosnia? I mean, why we didn't have something similar for Bosnia? From the point of view of the United States, it was essential to avoid a third Balkan war at the end of the 20th century. They wanted to protect Europe from a war with a spillover from Kosovo and Serbia into Albania, Greece, Bulgaria, Turkey, and I mean, two of them were already NATO members. So that was the origins. But Bosnia was different from Kosovo, because it was not expected a spillover effect because of Bosnia or because of Croatia. So that was a difference in perception as seen from Washington. But we have also not just the United States national interest, we have the Serbian national interest. I mean, Milosevic started his political career, I mean, with this big change in April '87, let's say, symbolically. So the Kosovo was brought on the top of the agenda from 89, 87 until 89, and also in the years later. So it was, let's say, that was the beginning of this process. But then coming to much more recent time, let's say that all along the 90s, let's say from 93 until the very same 1999, that so-called Christmas warning was incorporated inside the US national strategy to protect their own interests. It was a public document. It was not a secret. On the other hand, we had this big change at the beginning of 1998. So that's the time when the Kosovo Liberation Army, that didn't appear suddenly only in 1998, but still the very change is fighting against Serbian police and Yugoslav soldiers in Kosovo. It started at the beginning of '98, the real big fight. So that's a very important historical moment, because at a certain point in the spring of 1998, the Kosovo Liberation Army controlled more than half of the territory of Kosovo. I mean, essentially the rural areas, not the cities or the towns, but still it was very important because they blocked the main ways of connection and networks, roads network in Kosovo. So it was a nightmare for, as seen from Belgrade. So this started another process. This new process was in the summer of 1998. Milosevic, Belgrade, thought that they had enough strength adopting some of the weapons and the personnel of the Yugoslav army and giving that to, let's say, to the police of Serbia to use it against the Kosovo Liberation Army that were seen as terrorists from Belgrade. So this proportion of means to eradicate a terroristic group widespread in the province, they started to kill and to create refugees in among the civilian population. So that was the starting of the humanitarian problem, the humanitarian issues that the Western and the international community wanted to avoid. Then another step, very extremely important, was, as Nataša mentioned herself, it was October 98. In October 98, it was very close, the NATO intervention against Yugoslavia. But in the end, the Richard Holbrooke, made a deal with Milosevic. So it was stopped, this NATO intervention, but this agreement from October 98 didn't last that much. The activities of Kosovo Liberation Army and the Belgrade security forces, again in the winter, autumn, winter, were generating new victims among the civilians. And that was a very huge problem because there was no food and no shelters. So, and then also, again, Rambouillet was another very huge possibilities to solve the crisis, but it was at the same time also a problem because the Serbian side was not ready to accept this peace agreement because in the end it looked like they had to give up their own sovereignty on a part of its own territory, and it was often mentioned the so-called Annex B, because in this annex it was said that NATO troops would have the right to travel all across Yugoslavia, etc. And that was perceived as too much from Belgrade. But it is interesting that a very similar annex was used for Dayton just a few years before that. And the NATO troops were expected to travel across the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia in order to go in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in Republika Srpska. And Milosevic, reading the document, the classified document of the International Criminal Tribunal for the Crimes in former Yugoslavia, it is clear that Milosevic in December 1995, he was totally okay with that. He was fine with the NATO troops traveling across his country. So it is interesting how the cynicism and the realpolitik and also this point of view of exploiting the issues in order to stay in power, as Milosevic made several times from the beginning, the end of the 80s until the end of the 90s.
Thank you so much, Christian, and you are such a very well-versed academic, because every time I wanted to stop you, your sentence went on and on. So thank you very much. I will now give a floor to Franziska, and all other comments, things you couldn't say in these 7+ minutes, you could say later. Franziska, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I would like to wrap up this round of questions, and I would like to mainly talk from a perspective of my profession. So I'm a journalist in the region. I'm part of a generation that, I don't know if you should say thankfully, did not cover the war. I was born in '94. So I'm basically covering today as a journalist what is left from this intervention in 1999 and the state building process of Kosovo, which is for some Europe's youngest states, for some, for example, in the eyes of Serbia, but Russia also, but also Spain and other EU member countries, not a state. But that's a different topic. So I would like to speak about this perspective based on also people that I recently met when I was in Pristina a few months ago, but I'll come to that later. I think Christian gave us a really good deep dive into the historical details and what has happened since '92. However, I think we all know or have heard about this saying that the breakup of Yugoslavia started and ended in Kosovo, started in '98 and ended in '99. In '98, after the death of Tito, there were already protests happening in Kosovo. And as we know, in '99, with the NATO intervention, the last war in the Balkans was ended. And what is lying between these two dates, I think we've already discussed about this pretty well, but I would kind of briefly structure it with the following points. So Milosevic's rise to power, Kosovo's autonomy being withdrawn in 1989, the peaceful resistance from President Rugova, the parallel educational system, economic system in Kosovo, the Dayton Agreement in '95, and the Kosovo question not being discussed, which also led to the UÇK, so the Kosovo Liberation Army, getting stronger and starting the fights at beginning of '98. And then, of course, the horrific, horrible numbers of hundreds of thousands Albanians being displaced, ethnic cleansing happening, and so on. So these are the historical facts that we all know and that we discussed today. But I just want to remind everyone that this is also sort of an academic bubble. And as a journalist, I kind of step out of this academic bubble quite often. And I am in the field talking to people that see this very differently and have a very different interpretation and have a very different view on what has happened, and also statistics when it comes to how many people have died during the intervention. So I'll give you a little bit of an example from the field, as we reporters say. In February, I was in Pristina, and I worked on a profile about how young people that were born during the war or even after, Serbs and Albanians, see the intervention, but also the war itself. And there were two men that were really sticking with me, one Serb, one Albanian, and they gave me very contrary interpretations and views on the question that we're discussing now. So what has actually happened and when did the war start for them? So one of them is Leat. He's an Albanian movie maker, DJ living in Pristina. And when I asked him, so when was the war? When did you experience war? He said, well, 1998, he was in a cellar hiding with his family from either Serb paramilitaries or the Yugoslav army. He didn't give that detail, in a village in western Kosovo. And that was his answer, 1998. When I asked this very same question to a Serb, the same age, living only 15 minutes away from Leat, this guy is called Dusan, he gave me a completely different answer. He said, for him, war happened in '99, so when the intervention started and the bombs. But also he said, for him, in his generation, war happened in 2004 when there were unrests happening in Kosovo after the intervention, which Serbs also as a collective memory call the March pogroms. So what do I want to say with this? There are historical facts that we discussed today, and there are statistics on how many civilians have died in the intervention. but as a journalist, when I'm talking to people on the street, I see two sides, very hard to be combined with each other, and two realities that unfortunately don't grow together with a common collective memory, but more and more drift apart. So Albanians tell me that the bombs kind of saved them and their family, and they are very thankful to that, without mentioning that half of the civilians that died were actually Albanians, or even a slightly bit more. And Serbs see, or many Serbs, I don't generalize here, but many interview partners with Serb ethnicity say that 99 was the beginning of the war for them. So I think, to sum this up, because I have an eye on the clock already, this narrative is really hard to combine, and how people experienced it. So basically Albanians, or many Albanians, seeing the bombs as the end of the war, or bringing an end to the war, and many Serbs seeing the bombs as the war itself, and not asking the question what actually led to the bombs, what actually led to the intervention, and what has happened before. I think this today, when we talk about collective memory, and also how to find a common dealing with the past, is a very, very important question as well.
Thank you very much, Franziska. And I constructed this discussion that you will be also answering first the second round.
Oh, yeah.
So that you can expand a little bit more. This round is going to be 5 minutes. And the question to you is, why was the NATO intervention in Kosovo in 1999 seen as a game changer in the relationship between the Russian Federation and the West, meaning Euro-Atlantic Alliance?
I think this question is very interesting, especially since the war in Ukraine, but I will come to that a little bit later. Because the man that came to power in 1999, Vladimir Putin, came to power shortly after the NATO intervention, a few months after. He very much uses this intervention to justify the so-called military, the war against Ukraine. Let's not use the Kremlin narrative. Let's call it as it is, the war against Ukraine. But to come back to your question, so yes, I would very much agree that the intervention in 99 was a turning point. There's also an event that portrays that, I think, very well, or an anecdote. I think it was on the 24th of March, 1999, so actually the beginning of the intervention, when the back then Prime Minister of Russia, I noted down his name, I don't know it by heart, Primakov, he was on an airplane to the US, and when he learned about the intervention actually starting, he canceled the trip, and he basically did a U-turn, so he flew back. So I think we can all agree on the fact that the intervention was launched against Russia's will. We have heard today already several times that the intervention lacked the endorsement by the UN Security Council. So Russia voted against that, or was very much against that. Whether it was justified because it ended ethnic cleansing and perhaps even a genocide, this is a different question. I think we will have the chance to discuss this later. A fact is that Russia was vetoed against the intervention. And I think not only because of solidarity with, the Orthodox brother Serbia in the Balkans, and being a very important ally also of Yugoslavia and then Serbia, but also, and this we should not forget, also because of their own interest, because we shouldn't forget that at the same time, approximately the same time of the Kosovo War, there was also a war going on in Chechnya. So Russia was drawing a parallel between Kosovo as the former province of Serbia and their own, let's say, crisis within, and Muslim or majority Muslim Chechnya. So to sum this up, Russia didn't want to set a precedent also for further interventions. And this now leads me to what I said in the beginning, because this is very much contradictory to what is Putin argumenting today. Because today, if we listen to Putin's speeches, and they are very well documented and translated, we can see that he was using the Kosovo case, or in this case, the intervention of NATO in Kosovo in 1999, as a precedent and as a justification to launch an attack against Ukraine. So to launch an attack against a neighboring country. So Putin's narrative is, in a way, because the West has broken law, has intervened in Kosovo, Russia is also allowed to launch its own wars. I think Christian and also everyone of the panelists, we can all agree that there's like historically this parallel doesn't work out of many, many reasons. But it gives us a little bit of an example how the narrative of Russia is today and why Kosovo is still such a political and important topic. Also, when we consider that also when we listen to the narratives of far-right, often pro-Russian parties in Europe that are getting stronger in Austria, France, and many other countries. So to kind of stop by this, the 99 intervention was also seen as a sort of humiliation for the Kremlin, because Russia was part of the political negotiations in Rambouillet. There were 3 diplomats that talked to Milosevic, always 3 together, or at least that's how they portrayed it. And there were also 3 diplomats talking to Milosevic at the last time. It was an EU envoy, it was an American, and it was a Russian. So Russia was part of the solution-finding diplomatically process, but militarily, Russia was, let's say, not part of the club. So they were not seen as an equal partner, or that they didn't feel like treated like an equal partner. And this kind of had a long-term effect on the relations between Russia and the West, that now turned, as we all know, very sour and confrontational.
Thank you so much, Franziska. Christian, your 5-minute answer will be requested for the question: is there a Western perspective of the NATO intervention? And if so, what are the main features of Western NATO member states' narrative?
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, there is, we may say that there is some, let's say, a main trend or a main narrative in the West about the NATO intervention. The main features and main characteristics of this narrative could be put in this way. First of all, there was the necessity to halt, to stop a humanitarian catastrophe on the ground in Kosovo. There was already 1 year of conflict going on. Then all the diplomatic ways to stop these conflicts failed. I mean, Rambouillet, Paris, and there was ethnic cleansing on the ground, and that happened already before during the 90s in Bosnia and Croatia. So there was the need to stop this violence somehow in a very fast and effective way. So this is more or less, I mean, this is just the main characteristics, the main aspect of this, if I may say so, I mean, Western narrative about the NATO intervention, the NATO bombing of Yugoslavia, etc. But then we have to make several distinctions in this, because are we talking about academy? Are we talking about the institutions, state institutions of NATO members? Are we talking about the public opinion? The point of advantage of the West is that there are several alternative explanations to the NATO intervention. This is the freedom of living in a democracy, and that you are enabled, even if your point of view is not approved, let's say, by the state institution, still you have the freedom to speak your and to share your point of view. So this is the very big difference with the authoritarian states. If we, let's say, if we compare somehow this Western narrative with the different narratives, first of all, we have to say one thing: the single states don't have an official narrative. NATO as an organization, but not the Italy or Germany or the United States. There is no commemoration, let's say, of this event. So, and then the other point is that, of course, in Serbia, in Kosovo, the point of view is completely different, because it is in their own interest to cultivate with the policies of public memory those events.
Thank you so much, Christian. I think that we will probably get lots of questions on this issue, so you can pause here after this short introduction, and I'm quite sure you will revisit this topic during the discussion. Nataša, as you noticed, we started with you and we are going to wrap up with you for many different reasons. One of the reasons, obviously, is that among all of us, you are a veteran activist when it comes to Kosovo realities. And our question to you is, why is the NATO intervention in Kosovo still a very important topic when it comes to your activities or activities of non-governmental organizations in Serbia region, but also wider?
Your question is very difficult because in the field, the picture about what's happened in the field after 25 years, we could see in Kosovo, politicians, society, victims of association, families of victims, and also civil society. All of them were involved in strengthening collective memory about what's happened in Kosovo during the 78 days. On the other side, in Serbia, we have on the topic level institution approach focused on 24th March on illegal decision of the United Nations. And on the other side, police and army supporting official approach to NATO. But the third side is, I would like to say, is a Humanitarian Law Center research organization with support civil society in Serbia, civil society and politician in Kosovo and wider, because Humanitarian Law Center is focused to show what's happened during the NATO bombing, and official approach every year starts with number that an accusation that NATO killed thousands and thousands citizens of Serbia. and you know, with accusing NATO for aggression, accusing for destruction of infrastructure, property, etc. And on the other side, our approach, because we are focused on victims, civilians, but also on human casualties on what's happened during the war. And every year we repeat what we register by names relating the victims. And always we repeat that 758 people were killed. Majority of them are Albanians, that more civilians were killed than policemen, soldiers, including the Yugoslav Army and Kosovo Liberation Army. And we say, we also use to say that explaining to public, to trying to open the eyes of public that 78 days is not, it cannot be explained by official approach. It was aggression, the 1,000 people or Serbs, citizens of Serbia were killed. We start every year, we show what's happened. We started with 3 days before beginning of NATO. Telling what's happened in a small city, Tschinderle, when you know, Serbian police, special police unit members entered, killed 20 people, and until date there are no remains. There are no information about what's happened. Where is the grave of those people? And we try to, with facts, with witnesses, to tell the public that so-called NATO aggression, that NATO bombing, NATO intervention is something different. That 7,000 Albanian civilians were killed. That you know, the responsibility for that is on side of Serbian forces, and we also say that during the NATO 388 Serbs and 136 Romas were killed, and evidence is clear that they were killed by action of Kosovo Liberation Army. But it's very difficult, you know, to oppose official propaganda, because every year official propaganda is stronger, accusing NATO for aggression, destruction, for killing. And for ordinary people, you know, when they listen that in attacks of NATO, 1,000 people were killed, and of course the people think that all of them were Serbs, without understanding, without accepting our facts, name of name of victims. The majority of their Albanians, you know, that 7,000 Albanians were killed. You know that only on the 27th April, Serbian police, supported by paramilitary formation, but also supported by army, killed more than 300 Albanian civilians. Before that, expelled for their houses, their villages. You know, they stopped in the village Meje, very close to Jakova city. They were killed, and after that, during the May of '99, their bodies were transferred to Serbia, you know, to cover up the crime. And what is the task of Humanitarian Law Center? To repeat the names and to repeat evidence about that.
Thank you so much, Nataša. All other things, I'm quite sure you will be able to explore further during the discussion. Thank you very much for your patience, and with the best of intentions, we are obviously lagging behind our timekeeping, but it was all for the good reasons. So by now, the discussion time started, and we have half an hour for discussion. And before me, I have a screen with your questions, and I would like to start with a question on not just denial of the crimes, but the question actually says, okay, we do understand that Kosovo Albanians suffered a lot. We also do understand that 2004 has been used as a year of trouble for Serbian population there, but is there any way that we could acknowledge the suffering of victims of both sides without falling into the trap of relativizing the experience in the way that, okay, we killed your side, you killed our side? Is there any way that we can recognize the suffering of both sides, Serbian side as well, without undermining and diminishing suffering, extent of suffering of Albanians? And I should add probably this to this very important question, is possible at all to evaluate suffering without entering into causality, which side caused and in what way, and with what intent and a means to achieve it, the suffering of the people. So if you have a intent to conquer the territory, large territory where there are no Serbs at all, the consequences for people, regular people living there, might be severe, detrimental, and those who planned it should have known this as well. So causality comes as well, because Nataša, if you just look into the numbers, and if you see suffering of the people, of course victims suffer. That's beyond a point, but how we can acknowledge it without falling into the trap of denialism or relativization of crimes, saying both sides are guilty and both sides afflicted crimes.
Who is speaking?
Well, you can start first.
I think that I would like to say something for me, and it's very important, you know. Respect for victims, dignity for victims is a very important issue, but it's very difficult to achieve, you know, dignity, respect for all of them. But part of responsibility for everything what's happened in Kosovo is on the side of international, so-called international community. NATO entered into Kosovo without strategy, without knowing what to do in Kosovo situation. It was confusion. UN police, KFOR soldiers, they were without knowledge about Kosovo, about situation. You know, they saw mass graves. They saw on other side Serbs who were in panic because members of Kosovo Liberation started with retaliation, you know, to expel Serbs, but who were from Serb side in Kosovo. Police entered, left Kosovo. Army left Kosovo. Majority of civilians, population left, Serbian population left Kosovo. In Kosovo state, majority of people who were in villages, they wanted to stay there in their houses. All elder people in the cities, and all of them, they pay big price for crimes committed by Serbian forces in Kosovo. It was a horrible time. UN policemen, KFOR soldiers went without strategy. They didn't know what to do, for them. And many Albanians at that time, I remember because I was during the NATO campaign in Kosovo after that, they talked with many Albanians. They were also, shocked with the situation. And many of them concluded that, that internationals think that it is better, to have a clear situation, that maybe it's better if Serbs leave Kosovo, and it will be easier to administrate and to build new institutions in Kosovo. And until date, I think that NATO and United Nations were without strategy entering in Kosovo, and they have obligation, both of them, and UN and NATO, to talk about that. Why NATO never speak about NATO bombing. In the last few years, we very often listen that some very important figures in time of NATO, they said, sorry for all victims, but nobody will say that it's time to speak about the gap. They didn't have strategy. They didn't know how to deal without how to get population, get for them, to speak about what's happened, to protect some minorities, to be very close to Albanian population.
Thank you, thank you, Nataša. I think I would like also Franziska to add about it, because it is also interesting to see what the newest opinion and reactions to this particular relativization and through victims.
Well, I will try to be very short on this. Also, I think the question how to find peace is one of the most important that countless of NGOs and people have asked themselves since decades. But well, I can give an example about today, where there are also some good initiatives where I think something is moving in the right direction, but not fully. I mean, there are initiatives where obviously different generations come together and they can just tell about what they have went through. However, the other day I met, for example, a very young Kosovo Albanian girl. She was born in 2008, so she's as old as her state, as she said. But if she discusses with someone her age that has Serbian ethnicity in Kosovo, of course, this is already the debate starting, because is Kosovo a state or not? But she gave me an example. She said, yeah, well, we all gathered together and I told about my family and they told about what they went through. And that's it. And that's how we departed. What I think is important still is exactly what Nataša said. We also need to know the dimensions, and we also need to put into account the numbers, not to point the finger towards who suffered more, but we just need to know these dimensions, because I can tell you that if we don't accept these numbers and if we don't teach these numbers in schools, they are not, we will see very big frustrations because, for example, today, if you speak with Serbs living in the north of Kosovo, in these 4 municipalities that are directly bordering Serbia, or in their eyes, of course, part of Serbia, what they say is in a way also horrific, because they say what we go through today is the same as Albanians go through the 90s. And I think we can all agree that this is historically wrong. But I think they also say that because in their textbooks in schools, they don't learn and they don't see a different reality. So my point is, yes, everyone should tell their suffering, but also putting into account the dimensions and knowing the statistics and knowing exactly what Nataša Kandić is doing, knowing the names of the victims and knowing the numbers.
Thank you so much. Christian, I have for you a question appropriately asked a historian. The question is, why wasn't Kosovo included in the Dayton negotiations in 1995, for those who are not aware what we are talking about?
Yes, well, according to the sources, it is rather evident, rather clear that to put Kosovo inside the Dayton Agreement, it would have mean, in the end, to have no Dayton at all, because Milosevic would have refused to accept to discuss about Kosovo or Kosovo I Metochia, as it was, and still it is said by the Belgrade point of view, to discuss the Kosovo issue in Dayton, because that was the bottom line, the red line, the bottom line, that it was not accepted at all for Milosevic. It was not possible to discuss, to even discuss. There are some books that mention that, and by some testimonies that were there at the time, that there was some manifestation, some protest in Dayton, in Ohio, some Albanians asking for that. But when Holbrooke mentioned that to Milosevic, there was no way to continue with Dayton. So that's in the end, but that's also the cause of the Kosovo Liberation Army, and the change and the shift of strategy from Rugova and his peaceful way to achieve independence compared with the armed rebellion of the Kosovo Liberation Army. So it was that was in the end the origin of the war in 98, 99.
Christian, thank you very much. And if you all allow me to abuse my position as a moderator, I would like to underscore what you, underline what you said. But for our younger audience, I would also like to say something which we older ones know and think everyone knows, is that at every negotiations of this kind, the parties, in this case, three parties, Bosniak Party, Bosnian Croats, and Bosnian Serbs were invited to say, to prepare for negotiations. And from a Serb side, they went on and saying, we want division 49-51%, so for Bosnia, 49%, and what we absolutely don't want it to include Kosovo on the negotiation agenda. Croats, for example, said, Mostar, we will never give up Mostar, it needs to be divided. And this is how they entered negotiations. And then all parties in advance have to agree with it. If you don't agree, Serbian party is not going to join, you know. So these are all things that are part of very long preparations, and many good things are cut on this preparation table. You know, they don't survive negotiations. But in this case, those who organize negotiations basically have to go around many times and get this what is off the limits, what they are never going to accept in the negotiations. So you have to stick to it, otherwise negotiations will fail. So this is the reality, and this is why several of you mentioned realpolitik, politics based on interest, national interest, and each state has to identify its national interest. And in politics, politics is very different than military and what NATO did. It's very different what law does. When you do political negotiations like that one, or Dayton, or Belgrade negotiations preceding Kumanovo, then states, representatives of the states, can only bargain and identify their interests. there is no other way politics works. And this is very hard to understand. So bargaining what I want and what I will eventually get, and in between how I can, you know, give something to you in order to get what I really want. Anyway, sorry for this liberty I took for myself. Another question for Christian, also because it is historian factual issue. Why did Russian soldiers or Russian Federation soldiers actually took part in KFOR at the beginning of the post-war consolidation, and which was the reason for them to withdraw?
Yes, thank you. But first of all, during May 1999, there was the idea
Excuse me, is it me? But I cannot hear Christian anymore.
No, I think he freezed, unfortunately, which is a pity because I was curious about the answer.
Oh, if Christian is still not able to speak,
yeah,
Christian?
sorry. Yes,
Okay.
I am. I'm sorry.
It was a suspense moment. We all wanted to hear your answer, and you just disappeared. Okay.
Yes. So the Russian side, they wanted to create some areas in Kosovo just with Russian soldiers. That was only in areas inhabited by a majority of Serbian inhabitants. So this kind of mini Dayton, let's say, for Kosovo was totally not accepted by the United States. They didn't want at all to have a new mini Dayton in Kosovo. So that was the beginning from a certain point of view. So the Russian accepted to have in the end their own soldier and mission integrated with the NATO under the American command, but they wanted somehow their own independence. One side and effect of that was the military mission that of Russian troops from Bosnia to Slatina airport in June 1999. So that it was the situation went a little bit out of control. There was the risk of a third world war because of that Slatina airport case with the Russian that took the control of that airport. So that was a very a gray zone that left some scare between some troubles between the United States and Russia. But why they accepted because it was part of the deal to be there in Kosovo and stationing with the peacekeeping mission. But they wanted to be, they were Russian at the time. I mean, part of the deal with and the peace agreement between Serbia, European Union, United Nations, and Russia. So that is one part of the story. But why it was not possible? Why they left? Why did they left Kosovo? Kosovo mission. It is not clear. I tried to investigate in the documents, but since it is after the end of the Kosovo War, for me it was more difficult to find a definitive answer. Apparently, it seems that at the time, since Putin, the president of Russia, was not able to achieve his own goals in the region with that very small mission, and probably because it was more those soldiers and the expenditure to maintain those troops there in the end was they in Moscow, they thought that they were needed, that those resources somewhere else for some other missions or needs. So they left, they stopped this mission, but took part in this mission. But it is not clear. I mean, it is clear why they accepted to be part of the mission. It is less clear why they decided to leave that mission.
Thank you so much. If
Neva,
Nataša can add something to it, yeah, I would be very.
It's clear why Russia accepted to be part of mission, because you know, Russia was involved in making decision about without any opposing NATO bombing. It's completely clear. But what's happened, for example, Christian mentioned that when a Russian unit from Bosnia tried to take power in the airport of Slatina, until date is not completely clear. There are no enough evidence, official evidence about that. But it's clear that Russia was at that time on the side of international community, not on the side with the mission. The soldiers were present in parts of Kosovo, but in the field, the Serbs were not satisfied with Russian soldiers because they saw that, for example, Americans have bigger power in the field, that nobody's afraid from Russian soldiers, that Americans are very important, and you know, Russian soldiers were not big protection for Serbs, and Serbs were not, you know, very sad that they reacted when soldiers left Kosovo, but there are no enough evidence with I think on official documents about the role of Russia, but we know that Russia played a very serious role convincing Milosevic to you know, accept Kumanovo agreement. Without Russia, it will be very difficult to convince Milosevic.
Yeah, thank you so much. For younger generation that does not understand why such involvement of Russian Federation, it became in 1994 in Bosnia with the formation of a contact group that was formed because Bosnian Serbs insisted there would be and should not be a peace agreement in Bosnia without Russian participation. Contact group survived because it was also sort of supervising Dayton Agreement. And in 1997, Klaus Kinski was the representing Germany and hosting event when they put Kosovo on the agenda, and ministers of foreign affairs, including Primakov, were involved in every step of following what was happening on the ground in Kosovo, up to the moment that Primakov made a U-turn because Clinton never actually wanted to go to Security Council to vote on the intervention because he knew he would get a veto, and that was never forgotten or forgiven from Moscow's side. But interesting thing is, after the Kosovo war, Kosovo was divided into military districts of French, German, British, American, and Italian. And this is beginning of Quinta as well, which is very important to sustain Kosovo. But Russian Federation was not one of them. So Russian Federation is involved in KFOR without having this sort of military district immediate rule, and it put Russia in a different position than Quinta states. And Quinta states are still informal sort of protector patron states that keep Kosovo alive as a de facto state. Sorry for my intervention, but we have 5 minutes left, and I have 2 questions, one for Franziska, one for Nataša, and then we will wrap it up. And Franziska, question for you is, do you think that admitting Kosovo as the starting point of the wedge between the West and Russia, we could fall into Putin's trap that Ukraine's invasion was a necessary step because of how evil the West is? Had the NATO intervention not happened, would Putin not decide to invade Ukraine, or would he invite Ukraine anyway, finding another excuse? Yeah, yes or no?
Yeah, I will be quick. Thanks, Besa, for the question. Of course, would he not? I do think he would have invaded Ukraine without NATO intervening in Kosovo. So we shouldn't make this mistake of drawing this parallel. I was also not falling into the trap myself. The reason I brought this up is that I see this narrative being brought up very strongly in the last month. Also because a lot of right-wing parties, again, I repeat myself, that gain ground in Europe, also ahead of the EU elections happening next month, push forward this narrative. And I see this narrative getting stronger. That's why we have to understand it, I think. So no, I don't agree with Putin's narrative of this parallel, NATO intervening in Kosovo. That's why he has a free path. But I think, I mean, as a journalist, I have to understand people bringing it up, and I have to find arguments against it. And there are many why you cannot compare what happened in Donbass and in Kosovo. But I think for this we don't have time anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We think you both agree, and I think it is very useful correction that we do not think, oh my God, Putin got ideas from...
No, it's a very good comment. Thanks a lot for that. And
Nataša, a question for you was, so much time was spent on criminal trials at the ICTY with almost no direct bearing for victims. Based on your experience, what can be done in order to bring justice to victims in Kosovo post-war, besides the compensation done by the government bodies?
I think debate is very important because all victims, for them, is very important to speak about what's happened to them. And you know what I learned during this time, that it's very important to give them space to listen to each other. During the RECOM process, after 3 and 4 years discussion, we heard some people from different ethnic sides that they learned to listen to each other. And for me, without debate, without giving the space to family of victims and also victims, it's very difficult to achieve normal relations between Kosovo and Serbia. And now, after 45 years, is the last moment to start to think how it's important to open public or political space for victims to give the space to speak and think, that without talking, without listening to each other, there are no possibility to achieve respect, dignity, and reconciliation.
Thank you so much. We have 1 minute left, so each of the panelists, what, in one sentence, what would you like or find important for us to take with us as some sort of wrap-up wisdom or advice? Christian, you first.
I think that there is still a deep need from the state point of view, from the states of the region and beyond, to rethink how to achieve this reconciliation process in order to respect the victims of those violence of the 90s and even later. So
Full
that's
stop.
my message.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Full stop. Okay. Franziska.
So one sentence. I think the West, so especially the EU, US, have failed in the last years to debunk myths growing in Kosovo. And this is why we, as civil society journalists and also academics, have to debunk these myths and bring the facts to the table in order to avoid another conflict.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Nataša, what would you like us to take with us from this webinar?
To civil society, academic communities without political will not manage to stop this hostility with memory politics. It's very important to build joint memory about the past.
Thank you so much. Thank you, our hosts. Thank you, Claudia, for being with us all this time, patiently waiting. Thank you, my university, not to disturb us. So I was happy one because I stayed on for quite a long time. Thank you for the patience of the audience. And if I had no time to read and put on agenda your questions, I'm quite sure that there will be another way to continue this. And we now know that it's certainly a reason for us to continue some topics that still matter. Thank you and goodbye.